Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to this evening event, or perhaps some people a morning event or whatever. It's a specific webinar for 1 hour on the Huaraz case against RWE, very important for the world climate case, litigation case. We are running since 5 years now. And we think it's a good moment because it's just the right day. 5 years ago, on the 24th of November 2015, Saúl Luciano Lliuya brought in his lawsuit against RWE at the court of Essen. And Essen, because of that is the location of RWE. And so it's a case under German law. And we have wonderful speakers now in the round to get some different perspectives. What is the importance of this still ongoing lawsuit, which is so relevant for the climate debate in the world and for climate justice? Before we start in the round with Saúl Luciano, you see him on the phone because he gets direct translation by Noah Walker-Crawford. You can also see on the screen that we don't lose time for interpretation. So they are interconnected in a wonderful way. But Saúl will answer the questions or will give his comment in Spanish, and Noah will translate it into English. We had another round before in German for German-speaking people, but now we do it more international because we see the relevance for the international debate. Just one word before, we have a chat, so you can participate with your comments, with your congratulations and whatever in the chat. And I think the participants in the round will look on the chat and perhaps will answer some of your questions if it's possible in the short time, but we will save all these comments and questions after the event, and also this film will be saved and is revisible in 1 or 2 days on the Germanwatch homepage. I think that's an offer to all those who can't do it in this time, or those who want to relook what we discussed today, because it's so prominent, so important, so you can do it more than one time. And if you write something into the chat, please do it with your whole name, and perhaps also with a city or country where you are coming from. That's helpful also for Saúl Luciano, that he gets a better idea who is participating in this event. So we start, and I would like to start with Saúl Luciano Lliuya, because he is the main and the key person in the whole activity with the lawsuit, that he tells us what is remarkable for him with the 5 years that we have this Huaraz case now on the table. And perhaps he can speak about 1 or 2 key experiences during the time of these 5 years. We had many different events. We had the visit to COP23 in COP21 in Paris together. Perhaps he can speak about this for the broader audience we have now with us. Saúl, do you want to start? There's still translation going on.
Buenas tardes con todos los presentes. Agradecer a todos por estar aquí, por interés que toman por este problema que estamos pasando en los Andes y en muchos lugares también. Lo significativo es para mí lo imposible que era antes de la demanda y lo posible que es ahora. Esto es lo más significativo. Experiencias, ha habido muchos, han pasado 5 años. Ha habido eventos donde donde hemos estado presentes. Eh, el día en que pusimos, un día como hoy, 24 de noviembre, cuando como Roda pusimos la demanda en el, en el casillero, es un momento que está siempre presente. También el momento triste, difíciles también ha habido. El más relevante ha sido cuando recibí la noticia vía telefónica, donde que el juez nos denegó la demanda. Y la parte más alegre, más esperanzador, más importante es donde el juez acepta nuestra demanda. Eso fue en Hamm. Y como dije, hasta antes de que el juez nos acepte en Hamm, todo lo veíamos imposible, pero después ha ido tomando forma y ahora creo que todo es posible y, y el resultado es esperanzador porque tenemos suficientes argumentos, pruebas que aquí en los Andes hay mucha desglaciación, mucha prueba que demostrar. Muchas gracias.
Yes, Saúl says, first of all, hello to everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks to everyone for their interest, for their interest in this problem that the people are facing in the Andes and in many people in the world, many places in the world. And for him, what's really significant now, 5 years after this lawsuit started, is that in the beginning it seemed impossible, but then it later became possible. And so there were a lot of important moments, experiences in this time, big events that he attended. So it started 5 years ago when he submitted the lawsuit with his lawyer, Roda Verheyen, and they threw it into the court mailbox at the court in Essen. And then a year later, there was a sad moment because at the lower court dismissed the case. And he remembers when at the time he was in Huaraz in Peru, he received a phone call and from the lawyer saying the case had been dismissed. But later after that, there came a very happy moment. The happiest moment so far in the case was at the court in Hamm, at the appeals court, the judges declared that the case was admissible. And up to that point, like he said, it seemed impossible. But after that, things really began to take shape. And now it really seems like anything is possible. So this is something that gives him a lot of hope. And now as the case goes forward, there's lots of good proof, strong arguments about glacial retreat in the Andes. And so there's a lot of hope going forward.
Thank you so much to both of you. I switch over to Roda, the lawyer of Saúl Luciano. And perhaps, Roda, you can explain really what is the background of the case, how it can work, what is the legal background on the whole thing, and what are one or two most important experiences for you during the last 5 years.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm happy to be here. Hello to the team and hello to the audience. We are, I think, all glad to be here 5 years on. The court is still contemplating this case, whereas at the beginning, people were calling us names and crazy. I don't think we are crazy. We're just courageous. And especially Saúl is very courageous. So let me talk a little bit about the content of the case. Most of the people listening to this will have seen some articles in the papers or even read the actual briefs and judgments that we've received so far. But what is important is that this case is not a complete novelty with respect to the law that it uses. It uses existing law, and it's a nuisance provision. It's section 1004 of our civil law code. It's a very, very old provision, which essentially just says that if you have a disturbance of your property, you can ask the disturber to stop disturbing you. And that means in this case that because the disturbance has already started and is ongoing with respect to greenhouse gases accumulating in the atmosphere, the disturbance, which is the risk to Saúl's property, can only be stopped by actually taking preventive measures and protection measures. So what we're asking for is a share of the protection costs. We are not asking RWE to fix climate change. We are asking climate change to fix their share of climate change. And that is very important, I think, also to the story of this whole case and why it was credible to the court in Hamm, at least. The way this case is shaped is very interesting for me as a practicing lawyer, because in the beginning, there seemed to be so many hurdles and unsurmountable legal problems as well as factual problems. With the help of some scientists that we actually had to engage with, and I'm saying had to because every scientist we engage with is biased and can no longer be unbiased court representative in the end. So with the help of, for example, Christian, who is present here, but also Mujib Latif, who was present before, and some others who helped us understand existing science and helped the court understand existing science, we were able to overcome many of the things thrown our way, arguments that were sometimes very strange and sometimes actually very difficult. But overall, the feeling of there is something wrong here and it has to be fixed with existing law prevailed. And that's where we stand right now, because 3 years ago, the court in Hamm declared that there is responsibility of large emitters for the impacts of climate change, as long as we can prove it. And we are now in the process of trying to prove it. Patricia, who's also here, is a very important part of this right now because she's linking us to Peru and Peruvian law. Because what has happened is the court in Germany actually ordering us to go to Peru to look at the proof. So we're waiting for a site visit. We've had lots of difficulties again, hurdles that we have to overcome, not least the pandemic right now, which is stalling the site visit. But we are very hopeful that we can actually continue this case with factual proof. As always in a civil law court, this issue is one of one party against the other, and we have the burden of proof. So nobody can say whether we will actually be able to meet that burden of proof at this moment. I believe we can, and I hope that with the help of all the wonderful people in this team, we will continue to work hard to do that. And I think I'll stop here. Again, thank you all. I'm very glad to be here, and to some extent, as it has done with Saúl, this case has changed and altered my life. And I would say it has enriched my life. Thank you again. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. You are really one of the key persons and one of the drivers in the whole activity. And you know the field of climate debate since a long time. I think that's also quite helpful, not to know only the legal aspects, but also the climate negotiational aspects. That's very important, but we will come back to this a little bit later. Patricia, you were mentioned already from Rhoda. And here in my back, we see the neighborhood of CO2 of RWE. This is a map showing what is an emergency region in between of the city of Huaraz. Huaraz, more or less 100,000 people, and more or less 50,000 of them could be hurt by a flood coming from the Palcacocha Lake, 1,000 meters above of Huaraz. And so the neighborhood on the one side, the global aspect on the other side, and how we should and how we can interact in a good way. Patricia, please jump in and tell us a little bit about the discussion in your country and how we can cooperate in a good way that it helps for the people there, but also help others, vulnerable people in the world in the right way. You must unmute yourself, please. Now it's working.
Okay. Yes. Well, it is an honor to be here. And when I met Saúl some time ago, my first feeling was to invite him for a huge supper or meal to honor the courage he had with his family to be fighting for the city of Huaraz, because he's not only defending his own house, but is defending the city of Huaraz on this. And of course, the nation of Peru, because the tropical glaciers, the 70% of the tropical glaciers in the world are in Peru. So yeah, so this is all already connected. What is the discussion in Peru about climate change now? Well, we had 3 presidents of Peru in 1 week, being the last one a very talented person who is Francisco Sagasti, and he has the support of all the country, I believe. And he said something very interesting in his speech when he made his oath as a president. Of course, he said that coronavirus has been a catastrophe, a very quick catastrophe, but climate change is a slow one, but it's a catastrophe as well coming over to the world, and he would like that action would be taken. And I thought this was very important because I saw, and Manuel can be a very close witness, presidents of Peru only spoke about climate change at the UN conference or at the UN Climate Change Convention, but they never speak about it just in normal national agenda. So that was a step forward, I believe. And the other thing is that, of course, the discussion in Peru is very strong within the environment organizations and business people trying to do something about the environment. They are very keen about the long-term structure or the long-term drivers for pandemics. And the drivers for pandemics are absolutely deforestation, not a very intensive use of agriculture, even non-sustainable manners for transportation. And all these drivers are drivers for pandemics, but also drivers for climate change and loss of biodiversity. So it's surprising that how the structural causes or the drivers for pandemics are the same for climate change and biodiversity loss. So this is a very interesting discussion going on now. Of course, we would like to have it more, but this is the kind of things that are going on. I can also mention that it's very impressive for us as Peruvians that a farmer like Saúl, who is also a tourist guide, who speaks Quechua, I don't speak Quechua. I'm ashamed about it, but he's a Quechua speaker, so he can address the whole Quechua inhabitants in Peru and speak about climate change. And I think he didn't do it yet in a massive way. That's why I think he's a very inspiring person to me. And of course, we proposed him to have the Environmental National Prize last year, but we were not successful. We will do it again. Yes. So many thanks, Saúl, for your courage, and my best regards to your family. I don't know whether I have enough time to say something else that I might do, but.
Thank you so much, Patricia. That's very helpful. I switch over now to Christoph, just to let him describe a little bit about the different dimensions we already addressed with this case today. Nobody knows how long it will take till the last decision in the case. We are in year 5 or beginning year 6, I would say. But we learned already a lot, and also business could learn a little bit from this case, and also other groupings, politicians and others learned perhaps or learned already something with this specific case. Christoph, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to say a thank you to all people you see here sitting in around this virtual table. I think it's such an honor and a joy to cooperate with you. First of all, Saúl, this is you and your family, and the way how you do this, the clarity to say claro, and then we really do it, and you stay behind it, and with such a vision and clear understanding of the basic relevance of this, that is absolutely fascinating to see Rhoda and her team as lawyers, which really have an imagination how to move the legal world forward in this context. To see scientists like Christian, but a number of them who move the scientific knowledge front forward in this context, to see people like Noah, who has changed his entire academic career because of this case and helped so much to connect with Saúl and his family and the people around. And the others around here. It's just fascinating to see this. And what drives us as Germanwatch, as a North-South NGO, to support this unique case? I think it shows so clearly this justice scandal of climate change. The poorest people in the world haven't hardly contributed to this, to climate change, but they are now the most affected people. To give it a number, 10% of the richest people in the world have produced 50% of the global emissions, and the 50% of the poorest people in the world have only produced 10% of the global emissions. But those people, this half of the humanity, are now bearing the burden of climate change. All of us have the burden, but they are the main affected people in the world at the moment. And I think this case shows this, and how we try to connect it with at least 3 big dimensions of the debate. One is, we have this debate in the UNFCCC context on adaptation and on loss and damage, where we want to protect people and to minimize the risk. But if the risk emerges, also that they get compensation and support in a situation of loss and damage. And we have seen very little progress and very little readiness to put money on the table to support this, to support in partnerships countries with this. And so we hope that this case can send a strong signal, and if it will be a positive outcome of the case, that every government knows our companies can be brought to court. If they are big emitters, the biggest emitters can be brought to court. And so it's better maybe we really support those people in a legal contract and in a political contract. Second thing is when Roda and Saúl discussed what is the right company to address this in Europe. It was no accident that RWE was the company chosen. It was the biggest emitter in Europe. That is, it was quite a logical choice that one of the 2 or 3 biggest emitters would be the candidate to go for. And I think it's, if this would be a positive outcome, it would send a strong signal to those companies in the world, oops, we should quickly change our business model, and to investors in these companies, we should think about still investing in those companies. And the third dimension, it's on a different level even. The provision where the case is based on is a neighborhood provision, so that you create damage in your neighborhood. But today in a globalized world, we are all neighbors, and we see this in the Corona crisis, but we also see this in climate change. Our CO2 emissions have an effect everywhere in the world, and so my understanding of democracy is that all people who are affected from a decision should be able to participate in this decision. In our globalized world, the poor people on this planet have no voice in our democracy to change what we do in our emissions. But they should have at least a voice in our courts, to have a voice there and to get compensation if they are affected. So these are, from my perspective, the 3 big dimensions on a political scale from this case. And we have come quite far so far. And I think even if we wouldn't get a final result, already now it has written legal history, because the court has said, yes, from a legal perspective, this causality is given. And you are right with your what you have brought forward here. Now the scientific part is still which has to be proven, whether this RWE really has produced 0.5% of the global emissions since industrialization, whether this 0.5% of the emissions have had an impact on the lagoon and the risk for Saúl and his house, and whether the house is in the main risk scenario if we get a lagoon, a collapse of the lagoon, or that a glacier would collapse into the lagoon and water would run down. So these are the things which have to be shown on a scientific side, but from a legal perspective, the argument was already accepted from the court. And so I think we made a big step forward. It can be far bigger, I hope soon. And thank you again to all of you.
Thank you very much, Christoph. I hand over now to Lili. It's really wonderful that since a long time we work together with you and the Heinrich Böll Foundation on this question of climate justice. And you are a key person for a movement worldwide on climate justice for global climate justice program and so on. Please give us an idea how far it is with this movement and how far this case plays a role for the activities and the perspectives in such a movement. Lili, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Good evening from Berlin, Germany to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and an honor as well. Such a great event, and I'm really happy to see Saúl again, at least on screen. We met a few times in Germany at international events. So I've had the pleasure of actually meeting Saúl in person and feeling that inspiration and courage that he has, which I hope comes across on the video screens as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, so I've been connected to this case in a number of ways, I guess. I guess the smallest piece is that as Heinrich Böll Foundation, we've contributed a tiny bit of practical things to travel costs and stuff. So that's really just an honor to play that minor role. But what is really much more important, I think, is so as Heinrich Böll Foundation, with a number of our partners, we've over the years organized big meetings, international meetings that we call Climate Justice Legal Expert Meetings, CJEMs, we call them, where we gather dozens of lawyers and activists in a specific region of the world to share experiences, to discuss new legal theories, and to actually come up with new legal strategy and potential cases and investigations relating to that region to fight climate change and to deal with the impacts of climate change. And we've done these meetings together with the Climate Justice Program, which is actually an organization that Roda co-founded many years ago, and which also is at the origin of the carbon majors research that is, part of the science that underpins the Huhr's case. So there are lots of connections. And I really have to say that during these climate justice legal expert meetings, the Huhr's case has served as a big inspiration for others. So we've had great conversations with lawyers and activists in Asia, in Africa, and in other countries of Latin America, who are really eager to learn about this case, to understand the theory and legal strategy behind it, and who are watching the German court as this proceeds. And we just know that, whatever route this will take, it will further serve as an inspiration for others, and we could potentially see many more similar cases in other parts of the world. And we've actually, so one of the reasons I guess I'm here as well is that I not only work for the Heinrich Böll Foundation, but also helped create the Climate Justice Fund, where I now serve as a board member. The Climate Justice Fund was created to actually help mobilize resources and funding to support climate legal work in the Global South. And that is something that we're really eager to do, because there are so many ideas, there's so many great ideas. They're really capable lawyers, activists with, who know their strategy, but what they lack in the Global South mostly are resources and funding, and there's the big work ahead of us. And I guess the final thing I wanted to mention, how I feel also personally connected to the case is really, and Christoph alluded to that already, is that this is something that really puts a spotlight on one of Europe's biggest polluters. And it's just amazing to see what that can do and how that can serve the climate movement in a place like Germany as well. It's almost like holding a mirror up for Germans, saying you're not just an energy transition leader, you're also a world champion in lignite production. And you have, the biggest producers sitting in your home country. And for me, it also, bringing that case helps connect climate justice struggles across regions and borders. And that I think can also serve as an inspiration for many more cases like this one going forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lili. That was really wonderful to get this overview where we are standing and what has to be done. And I know the question how it's funded, what it's really necessary. There are all the cases in the world which would be ready if there would be some funding. We do all the costs for this case from our Foundation for Sustainability, Stiftung Zukunftsfähigkeit, but I know it quite well. There are not so many foundations in the world who help in this direction. So we need more, And so your program is absolutely necessary, and we should do more together in the next future. I hand over now to my wonderful friend Manuel Pulgar-Vidal in Lima, also in Peru. And Manuel has today the not easy job to be the Director International on Climate for WWF. WWF is a worldwide active organization, but before he was a key person for the climate negotiations and also for the positive result of the Paris Climate Agreement, because he was the COP president of Peru in 2014 and in December 2014, and that helped a lot what you did, Manuel, together with your team and the interlinkage with the French government, what was at last the outcome of the Paris Climate Agreement in December 2015. So you did a really great job. You had the occasion to meet with Saúl already at COP23 in Bonn. What is your eye on the case, and how do you think is the influence of the case towards climate negotiations? We mentioned it already with loss and damage and adaptation discussion and so. Do you think it helps, it brings more wind for negotiation? You have the floor, Manuel.
Thank you very much, Klaus. And thank you for your kindly words. So before moving into my thoughts, let me say that we are here to celebrate, not to celebrate Saúl, to celebrate his family, to celebrate the people of Huaraz, Germanwatch, lawyers, Roda, congratulations. You are crazy people. That is the reality. What it is beautiful, what it is great. So it is to celebrate. So to move this celebration forward, to make this something bigger, let me share with you 9 very short points on how should we tell this story. Because I think that this story, despite that it hasn't finished yet, and we are still expecting resolutions and all these steps of the judiciary in Germany, there are many things that it can be shared. So let me start by saying, first, this story is about impacts. And it is interesting because here we are talking about glacier melting and all the impacts in the Laguna de Palcacocha. And also these impacts are strongly associated to risks. And it is important to raise this topic of risk because we are used to hearing that, for example, the World Economic Forum has identified how much climate and now biodiversity, it is in the top of the risk for the business sector. But probably we haven't developed yet a strong analysis on how much those risks are related to the most vulnerable people. That probably it is even more risky, more difficult for the most vulnerable people. So that moves me to the second reading to tell this story. So I think that this case, it is raising, it is highlighting the rights of the most vulnerable people. So it is not because the condition of forest, but it is also because of the new risk that they are facing in their daily basis, in their daily activities, that also could affect their traditional activities as the agriculture, because the glacier melting or any impact in the laguna could affect agriculture and could affect traditional activities for the communities. That moves me to the third conclusion or reading, Klaus, that it is, we are used to discussing this globally, what it is fantastic, and we should keep this global discussion, and we should continue working in defining new achievements and to achieve our objective of the Paris, to honor the Paris Agreement and all those kind of things. But the importance of this case, it is that it is connecting the global discourse with the local needs. And for me, that is really, really important because there are local needs. And for the people on the ground, these discussions around COPs, really, they don't care. and it is clear that they have real needs. The point it is how can we fit those real needs with the global discourse. And I think that is also something that it should be highlighted in relation to this case. This moves me to a fourth conclusion, and probably Roda will agree. I am an attorney by training. And also I used to be the executive director of the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law. And I think that in this case, it is bringing the new role of environmental law. Because you know that I am used to being very critical of what environmental law did, no? Because developed their things, their objective in a very instrumental way. So I think that for many years, environmental law was more focusing in the instruments, in the tools, and not in the rights. That it is what it should have been done, no? The point it is that this case, it is changing that narrative, and it is focusing on the rights. That I hope it is something that it could be kept by the future. That moves me to my fifth conclusion or reading that also I think Christoph mentioned. In the resolution of the regional, the appeal regional tribunal of Hamm, they mentioned the threshold, the 1.5, the science. So how important it is science to support this kind of cases. And fortunately, recently we have recovered our relation with science. And because of that science through IPCC and now through IPBES, they are developing the different kind of report that must support decision-making process, or the role of science. My sixth reading, it is about the relation in between climate and human rights. As we know, human rights was mentioned in the Paris Agreement in the preamble, no? But probably we haven't developed all what that does mean in relation to, okay, how can we connect these human rights with climate? And you know that in Latin America, the OAS is working in a resolution on climate and human rights. So we, the Organization of American States is developing a draft, no, to create that connection in between human rights and climate that I think this case it is raising. I am finishing three last points. Also, there is something really important in this case. This is my seventh reading. We are talking about a big emitter. And I think it was Christoph that also mentioned this. And what is the responsibility of the biggest emitters? And also what is the responsibility of this kind of emitters that are used to saying, I will be carbon neutral, I will be climate positive, I will be, and a lot of different claims with different phrases. The point it is, how can we give credibility and how much they could really fit their discourse of being something with real actions on the ground, no? But by assisting the people that they are affecting with their own activities. My eighth conclusion, it is something very important for Latin America. And I don't know if I think it was Lili that mentioned. This is about democracy, participation. You know that in Latin America, we are facing a lot of difficulties for the approval by law of what it is called the Acuerdo de Escazú, no? That it is the equivalent of the Aarhus in Europe, no? And there are a lot of denialism, no? So for example, in case of Peru, it has been postponed, as in, I think, Costa Rica, in some countries, because of this kind of polarization that we are currently suffering. In this case, it is about access to justice, it is about participation, and this is that is something that it should be highlighted. And probably all the last point it is that for sure, this is related to our idea to recover hope that this climate talks, that this climate negotiation, that this climate process, it is feasible, but by not leaving anybody behind, no? So this is a case in which we are bringing the people who used to be behind in this kind of discussion. So in that sense, Klaus, I do think that this case really contributes strongly to this recovery of hope and to the climate process. So again, congratulations to you all and to mostly to you, Saúl. And let's keep this and let's move it forward. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel. As always, it was great what you brought on the table. These 9 points are really important to think about them, to interact, to interlink it with what is in front of us. And I'm very clear that we move forward in these different perspectives and in these different fields of perspectives in the next future, also together with you. I just want to mention, because before I hand over to Christian, that we have funders also for this case. We had really good support of Wallace Global Fund for some time. They are very active in this field. They were very active in this field. And I know that Louis Gordon is with us now as a participant. The Center for Climate Integrity helped us a lot because we really needed money, and we will need money also in future for what is in front of us. And so without these supporters, we never could have done this. But we are in a good hope that also with the success we have already on the table, together with these networks, Lili, you spoke of different groupings worldwide, and to find out which are those who are in the most urgent situation and where we have to work together. I think that is also very important, not only to have the own case in your perspective, but to see the whole environment. Christian, now it's your moment, because Christian Huggel is doing a lot since 20 years in the field of climate scientists and science, but also to combine it with the concrete findings with the glaciers and what is happening there in the Andes in the neighborhood of Huaraz. So what happened in the last 5 years since our case is going on, also on the scientific level, and what can be some hope of us that the concrete Kausalität in German can be underlined by scientists in the next future, because that is really needed. Christian, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Klaus, and good evening, everybody. Very good to be with you. I mean, it's a very interesting case and also very challenging for science here as a science representative. As you mentioned, Klaus, I've been working in the Coria Blanca for 20 years or more, and originally mostly on glaciers and glacier hazard, which is glacial lake outburst floods. So I know the region very well. Also, many friends in Huaraz, of course, and colleagues in Peru. Now, what has changed, and I think what's very important is the case has actually moved into evidentiary state. So that has something to do with evidence. We need to provide evidence, and the other key word is causation. Yeah. We need to prove that there is a connection between emissions and flood risk in this case. This is also specific to this case. It's not something that already has happened, but that is in prospect to be happened, hopefully not. So in terms of evidence, I would like to say that it's a whole cascade of from emissions to climate, to glacial law, glacier shrinkage, glacial lake growth and formation, and then eventually a flood that could destroy part of Huaraz. And here it's very important. I mean, on the, I wouldn't say the easy part, but that what has traditionally been done by attribution science in climatology is basically between emissions and temperature rise. Now we have also been able, especially in the last 5 years, to work more on the glacier side. So thanks to that, it's now also clear that there is a clear anthropogenic signal in glacier retreat, also in the tropical Andes. And if this is contested by experts or lawyers of RWE, that's just increasingly ridiculous. However, then going further down this change from glaciers down to flood risk, that is actually really also a bit new territory, and this is complex, and also very much depends actually on what question is posed by the court or by the demand, and this is where we need to collaborate very much between science and the law expert. This is not necessarily evident for the scientists. And now the point I also want to make is really about the evidence, and this is also what we have seen. Peru has, and I really want to also acknowledge here all my colleagues and friends, glaciologists in Huaraz mostly, but also in Cusco, the traditional glaciology office of Autoridad Nacional de Agua, ANA, but also colleagues from INAIGEM, from the Institute of Glaciology, which I think has been founded under you, Manuel, or was it just exactly? I mean, this was a very important investment of the Peruvian state and still is. And just, I mean, this is really the data. People go up to 5,000 meters, 6,000 meters and collect samples to glacier mass balance. And this is really the evidence that is accumulating, and it's so clear. And also what has been added to that, I think, is on the level of flood modeling. That we have done quite a lot of things. I mean, in the past 10 years, we have been intensively working with many colleagues in Peru, in Huaraz, with governments supported by the Swiss corporation, COSURI or SDC, and trying to basically relieve and reduce the risks that are around. And I think this is also a very important aspect that needs to be seen. I think it's also related to what Manuel and others have said. This is eventually really affecting people, and we need to make sure that we have the measures in place, and this is mostly disaster risk reduction and adaptation on this end. And we also need to see that this is the best adaptation available we can have from the international community. And I think we have been really have many or a very good collaboration between people, scientists, colleagues in Peru, in Switzerland and other parts of the world. So I really want to thank also here all my friends and colleagues in Peru.
Thank you so much, Christian. That was very helpful, and it brings us more to the region itself, to Huaraz and the tropical Andes. And perhaps Noah, you can jump in now to give us some insights on your findings, because you also were very active as a scientist in that region. In the same time, you supported the case, you worked together with us. But now we are all waiting for your thesis. And this is also interconnected with the case in a good way. But what do you think? What is, as Manuel said, there is an interlinkage between what is happening on a local area with the global discussion. But what are the people thinking in that region? And perhaps at the last speaker in this round of 60 minutes, Saúl can give some comment on this, about his specific neighborhood in his village and in Huaraz itself. But perhaps you start first, Noah. What are your findings? What is able? Because Patricia, in a pre-discussion, you said, oh, the debate on climate in Peru is quite poor. But to bring up more awareness, what has to be done also in that region itself? Noah, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Klaus. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. I can hardly believe that it's already been 5 years since the lawsuit started. This feels like the time has flown by. And what this lawsuit, this claim in Germany really shows us is how climate change connects us all in the world, like various people have said on this panel today. And like Roda was talking about earlier, this lawsuit is applying neighborhood law. And so this shows us how we're all neighbors, but not just in kind of a vague, abstract way. But what this lawsuit shows us is that there essentially neighborly connections that we can draw between companies like RWE and people like Saúl who are affected by climate change. That it isn't just that everyone in the world has some kind of vague responsibility in terms of climate change, but that there are specific actors like companies that have produced a lot of emissions and like wealthy countries that have made a substantial contribution to the problem. And because of that, they should help resolve it. So I think that's the value of this lawsuit, that it really helps us just imagine or think about climate change in a new conceptual way. And in concrete terms, as we've been hearing already, climate change is a huge problem for a lot of people in Peru and the Andes, as it is in a lot of other places in the world. And in the short term, the issue is that now people in the city of Huaraz are facing a flood risk because of melting glaciers, filling up glacial lakes with water. But in the long term, the even bigger issue is water scarcity, because glaciers are essentially water storage devices, and a lot of people depend on glacial meltwater. And when those glaciers disappear, that's going to be a massive problem. And even more than that, the mountains and the environment has an important spiritual value for a lot of people in the Andes living in this area as well. And so a lot of people are concerned about if these glaciers disappear, what does that mean for their life, for their culture, for their way of being? So these are great concerns for a lot of people in the area. And of course, what we've also been hearing today is unfortunately, there's often a disconnect between discussions going on at an international level about climate politics and adaptation policy, for example, that isn't very much connected to people's actual worries and needs at a local level. And I think what this lawsuit does is draw this very direct connection between these different dimensions, between these different scales. And so I think this lawsuit, no matter how it ends, no matter whether the Saúl wins or loses in the end, I think it's already been extremely successful just in pushing discussions and bringing us here today, and in bringing us forward in global discussions about climate change. Thank you.
No, great. Thank you very much. That is very important to keep this in mind, these interrelations, interconnections. I want to hand over for the last word in this round to Saúl again, because perhaps he can give us some signal of hope, very concrete, because he now has a training program with a helicopter to be active as a mountain guide in a team with others if there is an emergency case in his region. And there will be a helicopter quite soon. And you are one of the people who get a training now. And I think that is also important, that there's something happening in the region together with you and other people. Perhaps you can tell a little bit about this, and perhaps also what is your expectation for the next month and the next 2 years? It's a big question, I know, but we all are interested how you answer on this question. He gets a translation, and now it's free for Saúl.
Bueno, primero decir que agradecer a todos ustedes por el soporte, por la ayuda que me han dado. Sin ustedes esto no hubiera sido posible. Entiendo también que es muy importante el trabajo de ustedes como profesionales, científicos. Es la base de todo este proceso. Y las expectativas de recientemente, la semana pasada hemos estado en un curso el médico que se ha realizado en Lima Ha sido posible esto gracias a la cooperación entre la embajada alemana y la Fuerza Aérea del Perú. Esto con el fin de que últimamente ha habido desastres naturales tanto por Piura, por ejemplo, ha habido daños a humanos, materiales. Entonces, el Perú ha sufrido la deficiencia de... Oh, ¿qué pasó?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
El Perú ha sufrido los rescates que se han realizado ha sido tardíos en casos de desastres. En la montaña el rescate ha llegado muy tarde. Tal vez han durado un día, 2 días para llegar en el accidente, y con el helicóptero se va a reducir en horas, o 2 horas, en 4 horas. Y esto nos va a ser mucho de ayuda para y bueno, en el futuro, pues como guía de montaña, la situación en las montañas va a ser un poco más difícil. Vamos a requerir ayuda de rescates rápidos porque la glaciación está cambiando. Espero que sea de mucha ayuda el curso de helitácticos.
Yes, so Saúl first. ¿Algo más, Saúl?
Eso es todo, Noah.
Yeah. Saúl is saying, first of all, thank you to everyone here, and thanks for the support from everyone, because without so much support, all of this wouldn't have been possible. And what's important for him to highlight is also the work from the scientists who have contributed to this case in different ways, because the science really provides a lot of the basis for all of this. And as far as his own perspectives at the moment, last week he participated in a helicopter rescue course in Lima. This is so the German embassy in Peru and the Peruvian Air Force have given support to provide a helicopter rescue team to people in Huaraz for mountain rescues. So a big problem in the past in Peru has been that there have been natural disasters in different parts of the country. There have been a lot of deaths and material damage, but there weren't systems in place to reach these places on time to rescue people. And so, for instance, in the mountains, that's been a big issue. So because Saúl works as a mountain climbing guide, and sometimes there are accidents in the mountains, and it can take up to 1 or 2 days for people to arrive and to help those who've been in accidents. And so with a helicopter, this will change, because then they can arrive within hours. And looking towards the future, the situation in the mountains is getting more difficult. The mountains are changing with melting glaciers. There are more avalanches and things like that. And so it's a great help that now they're going to have this new rescue system.
Okay, thank you so much. We are a little bit out of time, but only a little bit, and we finish now. But the case is not finished. We go on, and nobody knows how long. But I think we are joining forces also with such events like this to know from each other. Also in the chat, we had some good meetings from some new people, with some new people, but also with very supportive people we had already in our network. And so let's do what is possible. We have only a small window of opportunity. The urgency is tremendous in the climate crisis. And so to use this case and other efforts, Manuel, we do a lot with Foundations 20, with so many foundations in the world and so. And so how to bridge what has to be done in a good way. I think this round was somehow a good example how we can build bridges, and that these bridges are really helpful for many others in the world. Thank you very much for contributing. Thank you very much to Roxana again to make it possible what we did on a technical scale. And yes, stay healthy, all of you. And we try to meet Saúl. He's now somewhere out. I can't see him any longer, but we will tell him, and also to you, Patricia, to you, Manuel. We will come over to Huaraz with lawyers and the court of Hamm in the next future, if it's possible with COVID-19, and then the case is going into the next stage. So let's cross fingers that we can do it quite soon. And thank you to all of you to joining us, and the panelists, mainly of course to you, but also to all participants worldwide. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, have a good morning, have a good night.
Thank you, and take care. Bye-bye.